Few prescription drugs have generated as much excitement as the new generation of weight loss drugs, commonly called GLP-1 medications. Fueled by constant media attention, celebrity success stories, social media influencers, and catchy commercials, GLP-1 drugs are often portrayed as the magic bullet for people who want to lose a lot of weight quickly and keep it off. You've probably seen the commercials for Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, and Mounjaro, even if you don't need to lose weight. This unprecedented public awareness has created record demand for these drugs and some unrealistic expectations about what they can do. And let's not forget, despite all the catchy jingles and happy patients shown in the ads, these are powerful prescription drugs that can cause unpleasant side effects and, in rare cases, serious complications. I'm Herb Weisbaum, the Consumer Man, a contributing editor at checkbook.org.
Welcome to Consumerpedia at checkbook.org. We're the nonprofit that helps consumers select services, avoid trouble, and save money. Because we don't accept any advertising or take money from any business we recommend, you can rely on checkbook.org to be completely independent and objective. Now, here's the host of Consumerpedia, America's consumer expert, the Consumer Man, Herb Weisbaum.
The GLP-1 family of drugs has taken off like a rocket. Forbes Health estimates that 1 in 8 adults, that's 30 million Americans, have taken drugs such as Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, and Zepbound. In this episode, we're going to take a deep dive into these drugs. We'll talk about the side effects and ways to deal with them. Plus, tell you all about a new Medicare program that will mean the federal government, for the first time, will now cover these drugs for millions of Americans who qualify. For the medical side of this discussion, we're joined by Dr. David Cummings, a professor of medicine at the University of Washington School of Medicine in Seattle, and an endocrinologist with the VA Puget Sound healthcare system. Dr. Cummings has spent the past 35 years studying humans' appetite, body weight, and energy metabolism. Hi, Dr. Cummings. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
Hi, Herb. Thank you very much for inviting me into your show.
So we hear so many news stories about GLP-1 drugs that it's easy to assume that everyone understands what these drugs are and how they work, but clearly that's not the case. So let's start with the name. Why GLP-1?
So there are 2 drugs that are in the market that kind of go under this particular rubric. One, if you use the generic term, which is what I use, it's called semaglutide, but the brand names are Ozempic and Wegovy. Those 2 brand names apply to whether it's being marketed for weight loss, in the case of Ozempic, or diabetes for Wegovy. And then the other drug is called tirzepatide, and that's branded under Mounjaro for diabetes or Zepbound for weight loss. And they tend to be called by everybody out there just called GLP-1s, because at least some of what they do is to mimic a natural hormone called GLP-1. And as to what that hormone does, when you eat a meal, eventually, everybody knows you start feeling full and you stop the meal. So how does your brain know you're full when you've just eaten stuff that's going into your guts? Clearly, there must be signals from your gut up to your brain. Some of that is sort of gastric distension relayed through nerves that communicate this sort of stretch of your stomach. But a big part of it has to do with chemical properties of food. Once they go past the stomach and get into your intestines, they cause the release of some intestinal hormones, one of which is GLP-1. And GLP-1 contributes to that feeling of fullness. It also, by the way, helps stimulate insulin. So when you develop a medicine that mimics it, the GLP-1 things, they help you feel full, like the hormone would normally do, and they help stimulate insulin secretion. And because of those 2 properties, they were first developed to treat obesity and diabetes.
So for the purpose of this podcast, for our listeners, when we talk about semaglutide, we're talking about Ozempic or Wegovy. And when we're talking about tirzepatide, we're talking about Zepbound or Mounjaro. The doctor tends to use the chemical name while we use the brand name because the commercials are nonstop if you watch television these days.
I personally don't particularly like the fact that the term GLP-1s has been used to describe the entire category, because the difference between tirzepatide and semaglutide is that tirzepatide has not only a GLP-1 stimulator, but also stimulates the receptors for another hormone called GIP. And a lot of its benefit comes from that second agency. Tirzepatide is significantly better than semaglutide for both weight loss and diabetes, probably because of that additional components of GIP. So I think calling it a GLP-1 undersells the effects of GIP, not to mention the fact that there's lots of drugs coming through the pipeline. There's going to be several introduced into the market each year for the next 5 at least, and they have other things that are not GLP-1. So it's a bit of a misnomer to call everything GLP-1s.
And we're going to talk more about the separation of the two and what's coming down the pipeline in a minute. But I want to start with when the drugs hit the market, they were designed to treat diabetes, and now, of course, they're used by people who want to lose weight. How effective are they at both of these conditions?
Oh, they're really effective. People who developed them knew they would be potentially useful for both endpoints, and they are. For diabetes, the most common expression of how your blood sugar is doing is something called a hemoglobin A1C. It's a laboratory value, and it reflects all of your blood sugar values over the past few weeks. It kind of integrates all the highs and lows. We all call it A1C. Tirzepatide lowers A1C by about 2.3 points, which is like going from an A1C of 9 to 6.7. So really bad control to almost normal. Semaglutide lowers it by about 1.5 points. These are very strong effects. You can get equally good lowering of blood sugar with insulin, but insulin has a lot of problems, and most other medicines for diabetes do not have as strong an impact on diabetes as these new medicines do.
What about the weight loss side?
That one's easier. Tirzepatide in randomized trials causes about 22% weight loss at about a year, and it seems to maintain at that level thereafter. The longest studies go to 3 years in the case of tirzepatide and 4 years in the case of semaglutide, and there doesn't seem to be any attenuation of the weight loss over those periods of time. It stays at about minus 22% from wherever you started for tirzepatide and about minus 15% if you're on semaglutide.
So as the research continues into what I'll call the GLP-1 family of drugs, we're finding that they can also be used to treat a variety of other medical problems. What are we researching them for?
Yeah, so they're really good at what they were designed to do, treat diabetes and obesity. But it seems like about every other month, there's some new paper coming out in one of our top journals like New England Journal of Medicine or something similar, reporting another randomized controlled trial showing benefits on what we call hard endpoints. So your blood sugar level or how much you weigh, they don't constitute hard endpoints because they are just measurements on some lab or some scale. They are proxies for what bad things might happen in the future. A hard endpoint would be like having a heart attack or dying. So in these new trials, over the past 2 years, we've shown that one or the other, or usually both drugs, have been demonstrated in randomized trials to reduce the following hard endpoints: heart attacks and strokes, congestive heart failure, something called major adverse kidney events, which would be like dying of kidney disease, getting a kidney transplant, or going on dialysis. That's stuff people really care about. Same thing for major adverse liver events, which would be dying of liver disease, getting a liver transplant, or developing cirrhosis. And then major improvements in clinically significant arthritis, osteoarthritis, that's wear and tear joint arthritis, and reductions in sleep apnea to an extent that's never been seen before by drugs. So that's the stuff that's been proven in randomized trials, the highest quality of evidence. And then there are strong suggestions from less high quality data. We call it observational data, which is just look at a bunch of people who are on these meds versus another bunch of similar people who are not on the meds and see what diseases are more common or less common in the two groups. And from that kind of observational study, and these can have like millions of people in the studies, there's very strong suggestion that these drugs reduce cancers, in particular obesity-related cancers. No surprise, they're obesity-related, so if you lose weight, you'd expect them to be less common.
So I've heard that these drugs make some people less interested in alcohol and smoking. Is that right?
That's true. It seems as though these drugs help with compulsive behaviors, not just alcohol and smoking, but also drug abuse. The third category that's a little bit less well established is maybe reductions in suicide. And perhaps the most tantalizing hint from the observational literature is a lowering incidence of dementia. This has not been proven with an RC, a randomized trial yet, and needs to be. And it's the farthest away, but it makes a lot of sense.
Let's talk about some of the most common questions patients have about going on these drugs for weight loss. I'm sure they're asking you, do I have to stay on the medicines forever, and what happens if I stop taking them?
Absolutely. So among the more than 1,000 people that I've put on to either semaglutide or tirzepatide, your question you just said is the number one most common. Everybody wants to take them to lose weight and then maintain the weight loss with their willpower. But at least in the clinical trial data from that's not the case. The usual trials will put them onto semaglutide or tirzepatide, they lose a bunch of weight, and then they get randomly assigned to continue on the drug or go to placebo. Those lucky enough to stay with the drug keep the weight off. Those unlucky enough to get assigned to placebo bounce right back up to where they were. They don't go all the way back up, and the best data suggests that maybe 75% of the weight that was lost is recovered, in other words, regained. And all the benefits on diabetes and corollary benefits on blood pressure and lipids and cholesterol, those are lost. The drugs don't work if you don't take them, They're coded by the FDA as forever drugs, intended to be taken forever, just like a drug for your cholesterol or your blood pressure.
What about the side effects? And some of them can be rather unpleasant.
Most of the side effects, the vast majority, are in the gastrointestinal domain, and the first two just represent the action of the drug doing what it's supposed to, but a little bit too far in a given body. One of the ways these medicines make you feel full is that they slow your gastrointestinal motility. Now, if that goes a little too far in the upper part of the gastrointestinal system, like the stomach, that's manifest as nausea. If it happens a little bit too far in your body, in the lower intestine, that might be constipation, which are the number 1 and 2 most common side effects. The third most common is, I don't understand the mechanism, diarrhea for some odd reason. Interestingly, recently we're getting more and more reports of number 4, kind of a distant cousin, apparently more urinary tract infections in women. There's no plausible mechanism by which these medicines should affect that risk for that. So the going hypothesis that, or the only thing I've ever heard, is that when women lose a lot of weight, it gives them more sexual confidence, they begin to have more intercourse, and that's a known risk factor for UTIs.
I know a lot of people who take these drugs worry if they're going to cause them to lose lean body mass, muscle, as well as the fat. Do folks have to worry about that?
I'm glad you asked that question. That seems to be on everybody's mind. So the answer to the question is, if you lose weight with these medicines, will some of it come off as lean body mass? And the answer is yes. The answer is also yes to that question if you lost weight with bariatric surgery or just with dieting. Weight loss from any mechanism, almost, will promote a loss of mostly fat and some lean. The only exception to that would be if you lost weight with pure exercise and nothing else. Very few people can lose much weight with just that. When you lose weight with bariatric surgery or these new medicines or older medicines or just dieting, about 3/4 of it is fat loss and about 1/4 of it is lean body mass loss. Lean body meaning muscle, which is people are worried about, but also fluid, organ weight, bone weight, and so on. There's no special thing about these medicines in terms of how much is lean versus fat. The important thing is to know that some of the loss of lean body mass or volume that happens with weight loss, including from these meds, represents clearing of fat out from the muscle. So muscle has fat in between the cells. That's like the marbling in Kobe beef. That's between muscle cells, and having less of that is no problem. But more importantly, some of the fat that's actually in muscle is inside muscle cells, where it does some damage metabolically and causes, like, insulin doesn't work very well in that setting. These drugs clear some of that out, which reduces the volume of your muscle, but doesn't hurt it in any way.
Do I need to eat more protein if I'm on one of these drugs?
That would lessen the degree of lean body mass loss. So the way to minimize the lean body mass that'll come off is protein is one thing, and probably even more is exercise.
Back to the side effects. Last year, Amy Schumer was on the Howard Stern radio show, and she was talking about how sick she became on Ozempic.
I tried it, and I was vomiting, and I'm in bed, and my son's like, can you, play tag? And I'm like, I can.
No.
And I was, shriveling away. I lost 30 pounds so quick. I looked great,
Wow.
and I couldn't lift my head off the pillow, so what's the point?
So what's your reaction to the fact that she had to get off the drug?
She may be unusually sensitive to the gastrointestinal side effects of the drugs. I mentioned those are the most common. What I would say, though, is that almost nobody has to come off the drug entirely. These medicines are started at a very low dose and then gradually increased over about 6 months at monthly intervals. And so if you run into intolerable side effects at any given dose, I would advise you just to back down to the last dose that you tolerated rather than scratching the drug altogether. And it'd be extremely uncommon to have intolerable side effects at dose level 1.
She also switched drugs, and that seemed to work for her. That's another option.
Yeah, she probably switched from semaglutide, meaning Ozempic, to tirzepatide, meaning Zepbound. Tirzepatide has not been shown in clinical trials to be better tolerated than semaglutide yet. And anecdotally, from my rather big experience, I have certainly seen it the case that people will have trouble tolerating semaglutide, switch them to tirzepatide, and they do better.
In doing research for this podcast, I found reports of people who say the drugs made them less excited about life. What was dubbed the Ozempic blahs? What about that?
It's called the Ozempic blahs, not the Ozempic blues, because the drugs do not cause an increase in depression. That's been clearly studied. If anything, they do the opposite. But what we're hearing kind of whispers of is that these medicines may take some of the amplitude of the highs and lows in life out. Maybe there's not as much zest, but there's not as deep a downsides. It's possible that some of the way they work is on the parts of the brain that are rewarded by things like, I don't know, maybe you're a zesty thing that you used to like to drink, or used to like to smoke, or gamble, or shop, or do drugs. And the fact that they tamp those things down more or less is a good thing. It does sort of flatten out the life experience a little bit so that life's a little bit less variable in its ups and downs. Now, for all the people I've ever talked to, that's a price well worth paying for the benefit they get.
Until now, Medicare hasn't covered the GLP-1 family of drugs when used exclusively for weight loss, and the out-of-pocket costs are pretty steep. But Medicare just changed the rules, and the government will pay for these drugs in some cases. Up next, what you need to know about Medicare's GLP-1 Bridge program. Also, Dr. Cummins will be back to talk about dealing with those unpleasant side effects and tell us about some new weight loss drugs that are in the pipeline. I'm Herb Weisbaum, the Consumer Man, and you're listening to Consumerpedia, powered by Checkbook.org.
At checkbook.org, we have the answers to your consumer questions 24/7. That's checkbook.org. We're a unique nonprofit that can help you with select local service providers, avoid trouble, and save money. Because we don't accept any advertising or take money from any business we recommend, you can rely on Checkbook to be completely independent and objective. Our advice is always free. Ratings of local services are available with a subscription. If you live in one of these 7 metro areas and haven't joined Checkbook yet, check us out. Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Seattle, San Francisco, Minneapolis-St. Paul, and Washington, D.C. Get your free 30-day subscription by going to checkbook.org/consumerpedia.
As of July 1st, Medicare for the first time is going to pay for the GLP-1 family of drugs when these drugs are prescribed for weight loss. It's called the GLP-1 Bridge program. It's a pilot program for those with Medicare Part D prescription drug coverage. We're going to find out more about this from Kevin Moss, Checkbook's Director of Decision Support. In that role, he leads consumer outreach initiatives that empower federal employees to make informed decisions about their health coverage. Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
I'm great, Herb. Thanks for having me.
So explain to us, what is the GLP-1 Bridge program?
Okay, this is a really important development for Medicare beneficiaries. And that is really access to GLP-1 drugs specifically prescribed for weight loss for the first time in the history of the Medicare program. So when Medicare Part D was originally written, Congress explicitly excluded coverage for drugs associated with weight loss or weight gain. And up to this July, the only way that you could get a GLP-1 drug is if you had an underlying condition like type 2 diabetes or heart disease. But now, with this new Bridge program, you now have access to GLP-1s specifically prescribed for weight loss.
Who's eligible for the program?
So if you have Part D coverage, and the Part D coverage can come from many different ways. So you might have a standalone prescription drug plan or a PDP. You might also have a Medicare Advantage plan that includes Medicare Part D, or some folks are enrolled in special needs plans or employer group waiver plans. All those folks are eligible for this new Bridge program. But in order to qualify, your provider or your doctor must submit a prior authorization confirming that you meet the eligibility requirements, and there are body mass index thresholds. And so those thresholds are, if you have no underlying health condition, your BMI must be 35 or higher. But if you do have some form of an underlying health condition, those standards go down to 27 or higher for the body mass index.
So basically, this is still not for someone who, for vanity reasons, just wants to drop 10 or 20 pounds and has no real medical reason to do it.
That's true. You still must meet the eligibility requirements, which are body mass index standards, and your doctor must submit a prior authorization into the program in order for you to be approved.
So which GLP-1 weight loss drugs are covered, Kevin, and how much am I going to have to pay out of pocket?
So there's broad coverage of 3 GLP-1 drugs. So all formulations of Wegovy and Foundeo, and then the quick pen formulation of Zepbound. So those are the 3 GLP-1s that are part of the program. And regardless of which one you go for or the dosage, it's just a flat $50 copay that you pay for a 1-month supply.
So for listeners who can benefit from this Medicare Bridge program, where do they get started?
Talk to your doctor. Really, this new program operates outside of your health insurance plan. This is something that's being run by Medicare. Talk to your doctor. They're going to submit the prior authorization directly to the program's central processor. And then once you're approved, you simply pick up your prescription at your preferred pharmacy. You pay the $50 copay, and it's that easy.
There is, though, one catch people need to know about.
That's right. Since this program operates outside of your insurance plan, it means that any of the costs that you pay out of pocket aren't going to attribute to your deductible of your Part D plan or the $2,100 out-of-pocket catastrophic limit of your Part D plan. So these expenses are kind of outside of your health plan, and you'll just want to take that into consideration when you're thinking about your overall healthcare spending.
But with the $50 copay, it's so low now, and for most people, unless you're really close to the limit, it's probably not going to get you where you need to be. It makes more sense to pay out of pocket.
Oh, yeah. And especially because before now, unless you had either type 2 diabetes or cardiovascular disease or had some other underlying condition, you didn't even have access to these drugs in your health insurance plan. And these prices are much lower than the prices that you would go and receive if you went to the manufacturer websites and you were looking at their prescription discount coupons, $50 a month, much lower than if you went to those sources.
So this sounds like a real money saver for people who are seriously overweight and qualify for using a GLP-1 drug.
Yes. I think this is going to be a very popular program. There's already people talking about that this may be the biggest rollout of prescription drug coverage in the history of Medicare. And I think the advice to consumers is start talking to your provider right now about this and get started.
So what we've been talking about up to this point, Kevin, is what the government's going to do to help you out with GLP-1 drugs. What about employers if I'm still employed and have a health program through them?
So many employers have been covering these drugs, but one recent trend is fewer employers are now offering these drugs. Recent data shows that 11% of employers have dropped or are planning to drop GLP-1 coverage, and more than a quarter of big companies are adding additional hurdles, such as requiring multiple weigh-ins a month or meal tracking on phone apps or mandatory health coaching. So if you work at an employer and you no longer have access to these drugs, you still have another option of receiving these drugs, and that's going directly to the manufacturer website. So whether it's Novo Nordisk's site for Wegovy, or if you go to Eli Lilly's site for Zepbound, you can go there and there's prescription discount coupons. They'll ask you a few qualification questions, but you'll get a coupon that you can then use when your doctor puts in the prescription. You can use that at your pharmacy, anywhere from like $150 to $350 a month or so, depending upon your drug. So these are still possibly going to be available to you, but they are going to probably cost you more money if your employer stops providing access to them.
Kevin Moss is the health coverage expert at checkbook.org. Kevin, it's nice to finally get some news that drug prices are going down. Thank you for letting us know about this.
Thanks, Herb. Thanks for having me.
Up next, Dr. Cummings joins us again to talk about dealing with the common side effects of using these GLP-1 type drugs and the new versions that are now available as pills. I'm Herb Weisbaum, the Consumer Man, and you're listening to Consumerpedia, powered by checkbook.org.
Consumerpedia Fast Facts. Obesity is defined as body mass index. A BMI of 30 or higher is a major chronic disease in America, affecting nearly 40% of adults in this country. It's a leading cause of preventable premature death and a key contributor to more than 40 other severe health conditions, including type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke, sleep apnea, and certain cancers. Obesity rates are heavily influenced by geography and socioeconomic factors. The highest rates of obesity are in the Midwest and South. The highest obesity rates are in West Virginia and Mississippi. The lowest are in Colorado and Washington, D.C. It's estimated the money spent on medical care and treatments directly related to obesity in the U.S. each year is about $173 billion.
We're back with Dr. David Cummings, professor of medicine at the University of Washington School of Medicine and an endocrinologist with the VA Puget Sound healthcare system. He's treated more than 1,000 patients with the GLP-1 family of drugs. Dr. Cummings, for those who go on Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, or Zepbound, what are the best practices when taking them?
They're prescribed to be started at low doses and gradually worked up to the heavy doses over a period of about 6 months. I would advise people to stay with that advice. The most common side effects are gastrointestinal troubles, and those are made less likely if you go slowly in your increasing dosage. In terms of reducing the probability you'll have trouble with GI side effects, there are some culinary suggestions. Spicy foods are apparently a bad idea, and fatty foods are a bad idea. Now, the drugs make it easier for you to stay away from fatty foods because they make you feel pretty full, and fatty foods are caloric, so that's kind of a double win.
Some of these drugs are now available in pill form, much less expensive than the injectable versions. What should listeners know about that?
Yeah, that's an exciting new development this year. There are 2 pills. One of them mimics semaglutide. The other one is a similar sort of thing, but a completely different chemical nature, but is just a GLP-1 stimulant. That's called orforglipron. The other one's called oral Wegovy. They were both approved for use in our country within the last few months. Overall, they're less effective for lowering body weight and improving diabetes than the injectable forms. There are some advantages to them. From what I know so far, most of my patients would rather take the injectables. First of all, the injectables, a lot of people, they think that injecting yourself sounds terrible. It should be pointed out, it's only once a week, and it's done with a very, very small needle embedded in a kind of a pen-like device where you just click one end of the pen. At the other end comes a tiny little needle that's so small you can hardly see it. You have to find a person who couldn't handle these injections. That said, if for whatever reason you just can't take injections, the oral ones are available. They're just less effective. You have to take them every day.
Just yesterday, by the way, I received 3 spam emails pushing compounded GLP-1 drugs. The pitch, get ready for summer for only $149 free shipping. But in the fine print, it said, quote, the FDA does not approve or review compounded products for safety, quality, or effectiveness. In fact, the FDA has issued warnings that some online pharmacies are selling counterfeits or unapproved compounded formulations that may be contaminated or improperly dosed. In other words, dangerous. People really need to stick to their doctors and not just go online, respond to one of these ads with the big headlines and the really thin people to buy these medications.
I agree. I mean, you expressed it well. I think some compounding pharmacies are probably above board and they sell you the good stuff and you can get it for a lot cheaper, but others are not. And so you're taking your chances. It's a crapshoot whether you're going to get real drug, whether the real drug will be pure and safe, or whether they're going to put oregano in a pill and sell it to you. I'm not an expert in compounding pharmacies, but they lack any clear regulation, so you really don't know what you're getting.
Final question, what else are drug companies working on when it comes to weight loss? What's in the pipeline that we might see on the market in the near future?
There's a slew of things coming through the pipeline. I have a slide I show that estimates when new drugs will be marketed through FDA approval in the next 5 or 6 years, and it's somewhere between 1 and 2 and upwards of 3 or 4 or 5 per year expected to be approved in the next several years.
Any final thoughts for people listening? You spend your life working with people who are overweight and want to lose weight. Any final thoughts you have for those listening?
Well, for most of my long career, the only really revolutionary results I was able to see with weight loss were to send somebody for bariatric surgery. And then if you have a person who's 300 pounds and they go to 200 pounds, it absolutely revolutionizes every feature of their life. It's transformative. That was never the case with medicines, but now we're getting closer to that being the case with these new medicines, especially tirzepatide. Metabolic surgery, bariatric surgery causes maybe 30 to 35% weight loss. Tirzepatide, about 22%. And the new drug that was just talked about at the ADA meeting, that's American Diabetes Association a few weeks ago, is called retatrutide. That promises somewhere between 28 and 30% weight loss, which is kind of knocking at the door where bariatric surgery is. So these drugs can be life transformative without an operation. And they can be used on top of or with surgery for people who need both. There's no reason to use one or the other. We've already talked about there are many benefits beyond weight loss and diabetes. So if there's ever been a drug in my career that qualifies for the term miracle drug, it's these medicines.
Fascinating conversation. Dr. David Cummings, professor of medicine at the University of Washington School of Medicine here in Seattle, and an endocrinologist at the VA Puget Sound healthcare system. Doctor, thank you for spending so much time and enlightening us about all this.
Entirely my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And with that, we're out of time. We hope you'll rate this episode. It's really helpful. And follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Remember, we release new episodes every other Thursday. Another way you can support this show is to follow us at Consumerpedia on Facebook and Instagram, at consumerpedia.org on Blue Sky, and at MyConsumerpedia on X. You can find me at consumerman.com. I'm Herb Weisbaum, always looking out for you. Until next time, be smart and shop wisely.
Consumerpedia is a public service of checkbook.org. We're a unique nonprofit that helps you save money and make smarter choices. You can count on Checkbook to help you find the best services and avoid the worst, with local ratings that are accurate and unbiased. If you live in or around these 7 cities and haven't joined Checkbook yet, check us out. Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Minneapolis-St. Paul, Seattle, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. To get your free 30-day subscription, go to checkbook.org/Consumerpedia. Consumerpedia, empowering consumers to save money and make smarter choices.